In this video, we talk about the Beast. Is he the world's worst serial killer? Colombian serial killer Luis Alfredo Garavito, born January 25, 1957 in Genova, was found guilty of killing 189 boys in the 1990s. Considering that many of Garavito's victims were abandoned by their families because they couldn't afford to care for them, commentators have speculated that their disappearances may have gone unnoticed. The eldest of 7 children, Garavito, was brought up in western Colombia. He barely briefly attended school and had a rough upbringing, being abused by his father and other neighbors. Many Colombian boys, primarily between the ages of 8 and 16, were reported missing or discovered dead during his killing spree in the 1990s. Their bodies horribly dismembered and displaying indications of sexual assault. A worldwide manhunt was launched in 1997 after the bodies of 36 boys were found in a graveyard close to the city of Pereira. Garavito, a drifter at the time with a history of alcoholism and mental illness, was detained on suspicion of sexually assaulting a young boy in 1999. He eventually admitted to killing 140 boys, and for killing 189 people, he was eventually given an 835-year prison term. He had used disguises to get access to his victims, many of whom were the unsupervised kids of street sellers. He lured the youths with promises of money or alcohol, most frequently disguising himself as a monk or a priest. During his murderous rampage, Garavito traveled widely, killing people in at least 11 of Colombia's 32 departments. He was also accused of killing people in Ecuador. During his time in prison, for his own safety, Garavito lived apart from the other inmates, and only consumes food and liquids that are brought to him by people he knows. He is described by his guards as calm, upbeat, and respectful. After being released from prison, he plans to begin studying to become a politician and work with mistreated children. Given that he has personally assaulted over 300 children, Garavito is an authority on the subject. He assaulted kids between the years of 6 and 16. Luis Garavito, also known as La Bestia, or the Beast. He raped, tortured, and killed between 100 and 400 boys between the years of 1992 and 1999. He admitted to 138 victims in court, which is the official number. What drives a person to commit such blasphemous crimes? Is it a defective genetic marker? Is it being tortured or experiencing severe cruelty at a young age? Are they possessed or taken over in some way? Some things can only be left to the imagination. Luis Garavito experienced a harsh upbringing before turning into an abuser himself. Garavito, the oldest of 7 brothers, was born on January 25, 1957, in Genova, Quindío, Colombia. He stated that their father had physically and psychologically mistreated all of his sons. Garavito left home when he was 16 and worked several odd jobs all around Colombia. He was employed as a store clerk and briefly engaged in the street hawking of religious symbols and prayer cards. He apparently became addicted to drinking and had a short fuse. According to police accounts, he attempted suicide once and had 5 years of psychiatric treatment as a result. In the meantime, a protracted civil conflict in Colombia that started in the late 1960s raged, leaving thousands of residents homeless and forced to survive on the streets. Since many of those who were made homeless were youngsters, nobody would notice if they went missing because their parents were either long gone or dead. When Luis Garavito committed his first murder in 1992, he would take advantage of this. The atrocities committed by Garavito had a very wide geographic scope. Though primarily in Pereira in the western state of Risaralda, he preyed on dozens, possibly hundreds, of adolescents in 54 other Colombian communities. Garavito, who took care in committing his crimes, paid particular attention to the poor, the homeless, and the orphaned lads who prowled the streets in search of sustenance or protection. When he did, he would approach them and try to entice them away from the busy city streets by offering them candy, toys, money, or jobs. Garavito would dress appropriately when advertising a job, pretending to be a priest, a farmer, an elderly guy, or a street vendor while looking for a young person to assist him at his home or place of business. To avoid being recognized, he frequently switched up his personas when appearing. After luring the youngster away, he would accompany him for a while urging him to tell Garavito about his life in order to gain his trust. In actuality, he was wearing the lads down by traveling just far enough for them to become exhausted, leaving them defenseless and vulnerable. Then he would attack. The exhausted captives were cornered by Luis Garavito, who then bound their wrists together. Then he would brutally torment them. Police reports claim that the beast definitely deserves the moniker. The victims' bodies, which were found, bore evidence of extensive torture, including his bite marks and anal penetration. The victims' genitalia were frequently removed and put in his mouth. Many of the bodies had their heads off. So how did he eventually get caught? Police opened an inquiry after a mass burial in Pereira was unintentionally found in late 1997. The sight of about 25 corpses was so gruesome that investigators at first thought a satanic group was responsible. Then, in February 1998, 2 naked kids' bodies were discovered lying next to one another on a Pereira hillside. A second body was discovered a short distance distant. All 3 of them had their throats cut and their hands shackled. Nearby, the murder weapon was discovered. Police discovered a note with an address inscribed on it while checking the area around the 3 boys. The person who lived at the address turned out to be Luis Garavito's long-term partner. His belongings were in the house even though he wasn't there at the time, and the girlfriend allowed the police access to them. Police found images of young boys, lengthy diary entries in which Garavito documented each of his crimes, and tally marks of his victims in one of his bags. Days were spent searching for Garavito, including searching his known residences and the neighborhood, where he was known to frequent in pursuit of fresh victims. Sadly, no information regarding Garavito's whereabouts was discovered as a result of the searches. Until April 22, that is. About a week into the search for Garavito, police in a nearby town detained a man on rape suspicion. An older man was following a small boy and eventually approaching him, as earlier observed by a young man sitting in an alleyway. The man saved the youngster and informed authorities because he believed the situation was critical enough for him to act. Blessed be this old man. Every story needs a hero, right? The man was booked by the police after being suspected of trying to rape someone. Unbeknownst to them, they were in possession of one of the deadliest murderers in history. Luis the Beast Garavito. Immediately after being questioned by Colombian National Police, the Beast broke under the strain. He admitted to sexually assaulting 147 young boys and disposing of their bodies in unmarked graves. He also created burial maps for the police. When authorities discovered a pair of eyeglasses at one of the crime scenes that matched Garavito's extremely detailed description, his claims were confirmed. He was ultimately found guilty of 138 counts of murder, however his other confessions are still being looked at. In Colombia, the maximum sentence for murder is about 13 years. Luis Garavito's sentence amounted to 1,853 years and 9 days when multiplied by the 138 counts he was given. According to Colombian law, anybody found guilty of crimes against minors must serve at least 60 years in jail. Luis Garavito, however, received a 22-year sentence since he assisted the police in finding the victims' bodies. He made a very public appeal for his release in 2021, claiming he had been a model prisoner and was currently living in constant dread of being murdered by other prisoners. He had not paid a fee for his victims, which roughly amounted $41,500, therefore the judge refused the request. The Beast is still incarcerated and won't be eligible for parole until 2023. What do you think the punishment for people who commit such acts should be? Should he be let free, like the serial killer we talk about in our previous video? If you want more of the scariest stories on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe. And we'll see you next time.